What if everything you've been told about being an empath is backwards? Carl Jung spent decades studying patients who possessed what looked like supernatural sensitivity to others' emotions and energy. The psychiatric community wanted to pathologize these experiences as delusion or boundary issues. But Jung did something radical. He took empaths seriously and studied them like a biologist studies a species with unusual sensory equipment. What he discovered changed his entire understanding of human consciousness. Empaths weren't imagining their abilities. They possessed actual neurological and psychological differences that allowed them to perceive information through channels most people couldn't access. But here's the problem Jung found. 95% of empaths were using these abilities in ways that destroyed them instead of empowering them. The difference between an empath who gets drained by their sensitivity and one who harnesses it as genuine power comes down to understanding what these abilities actually are and how they're supposed to function. Jung documented the specific mechanisms. He identified where empaths go wrong, and he developed techniques for using empathic abilities correctly. Today I'm going to show you the real abilities empaths possess according to Jung's research, why most empaths are using them backwards in ways that cause suffering, and the exact practices Jung created for transforming empathic sensitivity from wound into power. Jung's investigation started with a simple question that his colleagues thought was ridiculous. What if empaths aren't broken people with poor boundaries? What if they're people with functional abilities that they've never been taught to use correctly? He began documenting what empaths could actually do when their experiences were taken at face value rather than dismissed, and the patterns he found were too consistent to ignore. Empaths were perceiving real information about others' emotional states, psychological patterns, and energy fields. The question wasn't whether these perceptions were real. The question was how they worked and why they so often harmed the empath. The first ability Jung identified was what he called emotional field perception. Empaths could sense the emotional atmosphere of any environment without verbal communication. They'd walk into a room and immediately know something was wrong. They'd sit next to someone and feel waves of anxiety or sadness or rage that had no apparent source. Most empaths assumed these feelings were their own. They'd enter a space and suddenly feel depressed, anxious, or angry, and believe something was wrong with them. But Jung discovered these empaths were actually picking up the emotional frequencies of everyone around them. Like a radio receiver tuned to a station they didn't know they were listening to. This ability exists for a reason. Jung found that empaths typically develop this sensitivity in childhood environments where survival required reading emotional atmospheres accurately. If you grew up needing to know when your parent was about to explode, your nervous system learned to detect emotional shifts before they became visible. That childhood survival mechanism never turned off. But here's where Jung found empaths going catastrophically wrong. Instead of recognizing they were perceiving others' emotions, they absorbed those emotions as their own. They would walk through their day accumulating everyone else's anxiety, depression, anger, and fear, then wonder why they felt so terrible when nothing bad had actually happened to them. Jung called this absorption instead of perception, and he was adamant. This wasn't how the ability was supposed to function. Emotional field perception should work like vision. You see a tree, but you don't become the tree. You perceive someone's anger, but you don't have to absorb it into your own emotional state. The practice Jung developed was simple, but required discipline. Every time an empath felt a strong emotion arise, they had to pause and ask, Is this mine? Does this feeling connect to something in my actual circumstances? Or did it appear when I entered this space or encountered this person? This one question transformed how empaths related to their sensitivity. Because once they learned to distinguish their emotions from perceived emotions, they could stop absorbing. They could perceive someone's rage and think, that person is angry, without becoming angry themselves. They could sense someone's depression without sinking into depression. But Jung found this practice threatened empaths initially because they'd built their entire identity around feeling deeply. Learning that much of what they felt wasn't actually theirs created an identity crisis. If I'm not feeling all these feelings, who am I? The answer, Jung discovered, was that you're someone with a sophisticated perception ability who's been misusing it your entire life. And learning to use it correctly doesn't make you less empathic. It makes you accurately empathic instead of just overwhelmed. The second ability Jung documented was unconscious pattern recognition. Empaths could detect psychological patterns in people within minutes of meeting them. They'd know someone was untrustworthy before any lies were told. They'd sense someone was dangerous before any aggression appeared. They'd recognize someone's core wound before it was spoken. Jung discovered empaths processed massive amounts of microinformation unconsciously. Vocal inflections, micro-expressions, body language inconsistencies, energy fluctuations, word choice patterns. Their unconscious mind assembled this data into accurate psychological profiles at speeds that seemed impossible. This ability also evolved for survival. Children in unstable environments become masters at threat assessment. The child's safety depends on knowing, is this person safe right now? Will this interaction turn violent? The pattern recognition that develops is extraordinary and permanent. But Jung found empaths consistently betrayed this ability. Their pattern recognition would flag someone as unsafe, but they'd override the warning. They'd sense deception, but give the person the benefit of the doubt. They'd recognize a toxic pattern but stay hoping they were wrong. Jung called this the abandonment of inner knowing, and he found it was the primary mechanism through which empaths ended up in devastating relationships. Their ability accurately detected danger from the beginning, but they'd been socialized to distrust their perception. Nice people don't judge quickly. Spiritual people see the best in everyone. Good people give second chances. These social narratives taught empaths to ignore the very ability that existed to protect them. The correct use of pattern recognition, Jung insisted, was absolute trust. When your ability flags someone, believe it immediately. You don't need to be cruel or dramatic. You don't need to announce your assessment. You just need to maintain distance based on the information your nervous system is providing. Jung observed that empaths who learned to trust their pattern recognition developed what looked like supernatural discernment. They could attend an event and within 30 minutes identify who was safe and who wasn't. Not through conversation, through their ability reading patterns most people couldn't perceive. This made them seem judgmental to people who didn't understand the mechanism. But Jung knew these empaths weren't judging. They were reading accurate data and acting on it. Learning to trust that data was the difference between repeatedly choosing toxic people and being able to identify safe ones instantly. The third ability Jung identified was shadow detection. Empaths perceived not just what people showed, but what they were hiding. The rage beneath the smile, the manipulation beneath the charm, the emptiness beneath the performance. Jung called this perceiving the shadow, the parts of someone's psyche they have repressed and denied. Most people can't see others' shadows because they can't acknowledge their own. But empaths have nervous systems that register shadow material automatically. They'd sit with someone projecting confidence while feeling that person's terror. They'd listen to someone's success story while sensing the wound driving it. This ability made empaths valuable in therapeutic settings because they perceived what clients weren't saying or didn't know about themselves. But in personal relationships, it created massive problems because empaths consistently misused it. Instead of using shadow detection for discernment, empaths used it as a rescue mission. They'd see someone's shadow and feel compelled to heal it. They'd perceive someone's wound and attempt to fix it. They'd detect someone's pain and work to alleviate it. Jung was emphatic. This was using the ability backwards. Shadow detection exists to help you protect yourself from people whose unintegrated shadows make them unsafe. It's not a mandate to heal everyone whose shadow you perceive. He documented countless empaths who destroyed themselves, trying to heal people who weren't asking to be healed. The empath would see the wounded child beneath the abusive adult and stay trying to reach that child. They'd perceive the trauma driving someone's toxicity and excuse the behavior because they understood its source. But Jung would remind empaths, understanding why someone is dangerous doesn't make them safe. Perceiving someone's wound doesn't obligate you to heal it. Shadow detection is information that should inform your choices about relationship, not a mission statement requiring you to save everyone. The correct use of shadow detection was what Jung called compassionate discernment. You see people completely, both what they show and what they hide. Then you use that complete picture to make wise decisions about who to allow close. You can have compassion for someone's wounds while maintaining boundaries that protect you from their unintegrated shadow. This required empaths to accept a difficult truth. You can understand exactly why someone is the way they are without volunteering to help them change. Your ability to see their shadow completely doesn't create responsibility for their healing. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is see someone fully and choose not to engage. The fourth ability Jung documented was trajectory perception. Empaths could sense where relationships and situations were heading before they got there. They'd know a relationship was doomed in month 3, even though it wouldn't collapse until month 12. They'd sense a job situation deteriorating before any evidence appeared. They'd feel a friendship ending before any conflict occurred. Jung discovered this wasn't prophecy, it was pattern extrapolation. Empaths perceive subtle directional indicators that their unconscious assembled into trajectory predictions, micro changes in someone's energy, slight pattern shifts, early stage signs that preceded larger collapses. Their ability read the current and predicted the destination. But Jung found empaths consistently ignored this ability. They'd perceive where something was heading, then override the perception with hope. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will change. Maybe I'm being too negative. So they'd stay in situations their ability had already shown them the ending of. Then months later, when the situation collapsed exactly as their ability predicted, they'd be devastated. Not just by the loss, but by the recognition that they'd known all along and ignored it. They'd betrayed their own perception to maintain hope. Jung called this hope as self-abandonment. And he was harsh about it because he had witnessed too many empaths destroy themselves, hoping reality would conform to what they wanted instead of what their ability perceived. The correct use of trajectory perception was immediate action based on information. When your ability shows you where something is heading, believe it. you don't have to announce it or convince anyone else. You just have to make decisions based on what you perceive rather than what you wish were true. Jung taught empaths that this ability gave them the gift of lead time. If you can sense a relationship failing, you get months to prepare emotionally and practically. If you can feel a situation deteriorating, you have time to make alternative plans. The ability gives you foresight if you're willing to act on it instead of hoping it's wrong. Before we continue, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises inspired by the teachings of Carl Jung, designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get true self-discovery. The fifth ability Jung identified was energetic resonance. Empaths could directly feel and match the emotional frequency of others. When with someone anxious, they became anxious. With someone depressed, they became depressed. With someone chaotic, they became chaotic. This happened automatically, without conscious choice. Jung observed this ability evolved to allow caregivers to attune to pre-verbal infants. The mother's nervous system resonates with the baby's state, allowing her to know what the baby needs before it can communicate. It's a profound bonding mechanism when used in appropriate contexts. But empaths were resonating with everyone, constantly. Their nervous systems synchronized with whoever they encountered. By day's end, they'd absorbed 15 different emotional states and couldn't identify which one was theirs. Jung called this resonance without boundaries, and he found it was the fastest way to destroy an empath's health. Your nervous system isn't designed to process that many different emotional frequencies. It needs to maintain its own baseline state. The correct use of energetic resonance, according to Jung, was conscious choice. You don't resonate with everyone automatically. You choose when to activate this ability and with whom, and you learn to de-resonate immediately after. Jung taught a practice he called conscious return. After any interaction where you intentionally resonated with someone, offering support, holding space, facilitating healing, you immediately practice returning to your own energetic baseline. This might look like taking 3 conscious breaths while visualizing their energy returning to them and yours returning to you, or physically shaking out your body, or saying internally, "That's theirs, this is mine." The specific technique mattered less than the intention to separate after resonance. Jung found that empaths who learned to consciously activate and deactivate resonance could still offer profound support without being destroyed by it. They could sit with someone in crisis, fully present and attuned, then return to their own state afterward instead of carrying that crisis energy for days. But this required overriding years of conditioning that told empaths their value came from constant availability and absorption of others' pain. Learning to turn the ability off felt selfish. But Jung was clear. If you don't learn to control resonance, it will control you. The sixth ability Jung documented was dimensional perception. Empaths didn't see only surface reality. They perceived multiple layers simultaneously: the spoken words and the unspoken truth, the presented image and the hidden motivation, the conscious intention and the unconscious drive. Jung found this ability made empaths valuable clinically because they perceived what people weren't saying or didn't know about themselves. But personally, it created enormous difficulty because empaths were constantly aware of everyone's contradictions and inconsistencies. You'd be in conversation with someone saying they were fine while their energy screamed distress, listening to someone's plans while perceiving the fear sabotaging them, hearing someone's story while seeing the pattern they couldn't recognize. Most empaths responded to dimensional perception by trying to fix the contradictions they saw. They'd point out inconsistencies, challenge denials, push people to acknowledge what they were avoiding. This made empaths exhausting because no one wants their defenses constantly dismantled. Jung taught that dimensional perception wasn't permission to manage everyone's consciousness. The ability allows you to see completely, but seeing doesn't obligate you to say anything. Most people aren't ready for the dimensional truth you perceive. Pushing it on them doesn't help. It just makes you intrusive. The correct use of dimensional perception was silent wisdom. You see all the layers, you hold that complete picture, and you use it to make informed decisions about relationship without needing to announce everything you perceive. Jung emphasized this required humility. Yes, you can see things others miss, but everyone is on their own timeline for awareness. Your perception doesn't make you responsible for accelerating someone else's journey. Sometimes the most compassionate thing is to see someone completely and let them stay where they are. Jung's ultimate framework for using empathic abilities correctly came down to one principle. These abilities exist for your protection and discernment, not for rescue and absorption. Every ability empaths possess is designed to help them navigate reality wisely, not to make them responsible for managing everyone else's reality. When empaths understood their abilities were sophisticated navigation systems rather than mandates to heal the world, everything changed. They could perceive without absorbing, read patterns without needing to fix them, sense trajectories without hoping them away, resonate consciously and return to themselves, see dimensionally without becoming everyone's therapist. Jung observed that empaths who learned to use their abilities correctly developed a kind of power that looked nothing like traditional empaths. They weren't soft and accommodating. They were boundaried and discerning. They didn't absorb everyone's pain. They perceived it clearly and made wise decisions about engagement. This transformation confused people who'd known the empath before. Where did all that sensitivity go? Why aren't you helping anymore? Why are you so selective about who you spend time with? The empath hadn't lost their abilities. They'd learned to use them as designed. If you're an empath who's been exhausted and overwhelmed by your sensitivity, Jung would tell you this: your abilities aren't the problem. How you've been taught to use them is the problem. Every ability you possess is powerful when used correctly.